My approach to each new project is always kind of starts with some kind of response to the site. Sometimes that's kind of a sort of physical response, or also sometimes kind of more contextual response. And I think with this show, it's kind of a little bit of both. I was quite struck by the kind of unique mood of the space in Gallery 2 here at the Whitechapel, by the particularly things like the exposed brickwork, which give the space a kind of sense of being sort of slightly turned inside out, like a kind of external space. There is the brickwork kind of seems to be suggestive of the street outside, and that kind of led me on to thinking about the idea of a kind of streetscape, and then the idea of kind of doors and windows as kind of barriers, or partial kind of barriers between internal and external space, and sense of sort of voyeurism of what you can sort of see through windows or out of windows and behind curtains, and through spy holes in doors. So a lot of the objects kind of reference kind of everyday things that we might find within this idea of that kind of threshold between indoors and outdoors. So things that might be kind of found lost or discarded on the pavement, and things that might be kind of discarded in the porch, like kind of gloves or hats that you might kind of discard as you kind of come through that within that kind of transition space. What I don't do is use found objects. I stopped using found objects in installations many years ago, because I like the ambiguity that comes from kind of creating my own objects to use in installations. But they have a sense of the found object. They have a sense of function, or a sense of relating to things that are familiar. So yeah, it's important for me to kind of be able to know as much about processes of making as possible. So I do tend to try and learn a lot of new techniques, or certainly engage with them as much as I can. And it's not, the relationship I have with material is not so much about pushing it to its limits. It's more about using it in ways in which are kind of conventional in a sense. So I'm using a lot of techniques that are used in the production of everyday stuff, everyday objects. So for this show, I wanted to investigate the potential of making something like a traditional top hat and bowler hats for this work. I've worked with a company called Patey Hats, who are based here in London, and they make these types of hats in very kind of traditional manner, with shellac and hot irons over wooden and metal formers. Although this kind of interest in craft is very kind of central to what I do, I think that for me it's more the kind of psychology behind our relationship to material and form that I'm more interested in. The way that that material and form has an ability to sort of trigger psychological, emotional sort of reaction. Quite often people feel as though they have actually they've actually kind of come into physical contact with things, even although they haven't, because the work isn't highly interactive, highly immersive, but yet I think people really respond to that kind of tactile nature. I suppose that in order to interact with my work, you kind of need to draw upon that kind of subconscious knowledge of form and material that you have. And I think I choose materials which are kind of commonplace, things that sort of transcend time, place, location, such as leather and fabric and powder coated steel, which are kind of omnipresent in a way. And so the work is often a sort of combination of objects that have been handcrafted and things that have been produced through in a more kind of industrial way. And then these things come in, they only ever come together at the point where the works all arrive in the space. And at that point I start to work in situ and using the gallery space almost as a studio space, in order that the work has a sense of flux and a sense of something having kind of taken place within the space. You're not quite sure whether it has happened or it's about to happen, but that sense of the work not being fixed and final is something that's very important to me. The lack of conventional modes of presentation, so that objects are lent and are kind of precariously balanced. So the structural elements tend to be the initial thing that kind of finds its place within the space, and these are designed to kind of interrupt the kind of usual flow of movement around the space. They kind of create different areas, so you have more intimate spaces that you kind of discover when you negotiate the space as you walk around, and you see things from different vantage points. And then within that you find these kind of smaller objects that sort of punctuate this kind of journey around. In this case I wanted to use fabric, which these kind of curtain-like panels, which are caught up in the window frames, and I made a design which kind of echoes the brickwork in the room, but in a way which sort of suggests domestic textiles, maybe kind of 50s, maybe 80s kind of style. Each element in the installation can't really stand on its own. It's about the kind of bringing together of different elements and the kind of juxtaposition of different materials that make it into an artwork. So what's quite unusual for me in this particular context is the duration that the show will be on, because usually the work exists in a specific site for a few months, and then the work no longer exists. So for me to follow a piece of work over the course of a year will be quite interesting, just to kind of see, firstly what actually physically happens to some of the elements over time, and secondly to be able to kind of see it from a different perspective depending on other things that are happening at the same time. And so the idea of having the collaborations with the dancers is an interesting way to kind of punctuate this duration with events that will really kind of allow you to kind of see the work through different from a different viewpoint, from a very different perspective.